Hello there. What's going on, everybody? Obi-Wan is coming back. It is now official, and so now I'm going to talk about it. This has been all over the news for weeks now, and I hesitated to really talk about it, primarily because it's been all over the news multiple times over the past couple of years. There's always been these stories that have been coming out where, like, oh, Ewan McGregor signs on for Obi-Wan movie. Ewan McGregor signs on for Obi-Wan miniseries. For I think the past 2 years or so, there's been a story going on about every 4 to 5 months about this, that this is confirmed. It's very much confirmed. And last week it was the same thing. Even though it was just in talks, people were still reporting it as confirmed. And I didn't want to really talk about it until it was officially confirmed. And when I say officially confirmed, I'm talking about actually put out there by Disney, by Lucasfilm, by an official source officially announcing it. So now we can finally talk about this. Also do want to remind you guys there is still a huge giveaway going on right now for a $100 Amazon gift card. All you'll have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about this. So at the D23 Expo, Ewan McGregor came out and he was talking with Kathleen Kennedy, and everybody was so happy that he was there because everybody in the room had heard all the rumors, and a lot of these people didn't even consider it rumors. And so he's sitting there with this big backdrop, and he's got the Obi-Wan, and he asks Kathleen Kennedy, I want you to ask me if I'm going to play Obi-Wan again. And she asks him, all right, are you going to play Obi-Wan again? And he looks at the audience, and he goes, yes. So it was really an epic moment. And we are definitely getting an Obi-Wan mini-series, basically, that is going to... Basically, it's going to be like a long movie stretched out, kind of like a series. And we don't have a whole lot of details yet, but we do have the time frame. This is going to take place 11 years before A New Hope. So Luke is still a little kid here. It gives them enough time to do a lot of stuff here. He can leave Tatooine. He might stay on Tatooine, and it really brings up a lot of questions, but it also has some other potential things that it can have him do. So I kind of want to talk about some of the main ideas on things that might be able to happen. So first off, I'm going to give you guys my silly idea on, and I say it's a silly idea, but I've talked about it in some live streams, and I've talked about it with some people, that I think if he does leave Tatooine, it will make great sense not great sense, but I would love to see, at least at one point, for him to arrive at where they're building the Death Star. And we know that they move the Death Star around from place to place. It might turn out that it might just fit for Obi-Wan to maybe have been one of the reasons why they had to relocate the Death Star. Maybe he was able to find it out. But not only that, I want him to have an encounter with Darth Vader on board the Death Star under construction. Because granted, while it's under construction, it's still got plenty of places that have gravity and oxygen and stuff. So just because the super laser, which is the thing that took the longest to complete, the station itself has living quarters and things like that. So it would do a number of things if Obi-Wan was already on the Death Star. First off, in A New Hope, Obi-Wan somehow knows exactly where to go to disengage the tractor beam. Like, it's just like, yeah, no problem. It's like he's been there before. Now, that obviously was just in there for convenience, but it would make a lot of sense. The other thing is Obi-Wan meets Vader, and the first thing Vader says is, you should not have come back. So that also, granted, at the time, that was just one of these lines where, oh, they've met before and now they're meeting again, right? But as the Star Wars has grown and become more diverse, you're like, well, why would he say you have not have come back if the last time they met was on Mustafar? So I really think there's going to be another meeting. I think there's going to be another meeting because of those lines and because of what happens in A New Hope, and it would really fit. Now, some people, when I've said this to people in the past, they've come back and said, yeah, but he said when I left you, I was but the learner, now I am the master, and all of that sort of thing. Well, yes, sure, but all that means is that when Darth Vader faces Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan still whoops up on him. Maybe whoops up on him really good, and he's like, still the Padawan, Vader. There's so many quippy things that Ewan McGregor can say. I think this would be amazing if they made it happen. I mean, really, let me know, what you guys think about this theory. This is theory number 1 in the description below, that Obi-Wan meets Vader. Probably not during, it depends on how many seasons they do. If it's just a mini series and it's just an 8-part story and that's it, then yes, I think it should happen in that. But if there's more to it, if it ends up being like a full series and there's multiple seasons, then I don't think it needs to be a season 1 thing. It could be a season 2 or season 3 thing even. But I mean, there is a limit to how far you can go. But yeah, I could definitely see him leaving for a little bit. Now, it does beg the question, if he does leave, who is he leaving Luke with? Maybe Ahsoka. That is a thing, because Dave Filoni was asked about Ahsoka. They said, do you see any of your other creations like Ahsoka making the transition from animated to live action? And he was just like, you never know, like that, like the look on his face, like I've never seen him smile, like he was trying to contain it, but he couldn't, so that really kind of has that whole thing in there. So that's really cool. We also know that the scripts for Obi-Wan have already been written, and that also might be one of those reasons why Dave Filoni knows what's going on, because Dave Filoni is kind of got the Midas touch right now, where the things that he works on turn to gold. And so I think there's a lot to that, with maybe the exception of Resistance. I'm not sure how much involvement he has had in Resistance. While I think it is a good show for what it's meant to be. It's meant to be more of a kids show. But I think this weekend at D23, they've shown that Disney's Star Wars is not just kids Star Wars. It's got stuff for everybody, and a lot of the stuff we saw was for those grown fans, and even some of the angry fans. I think this is going to be reminding them of just how diverse Star Wars can be and how it can be for everybody. And I love that. I love that everybody is going to get something they love from Star Wars. And so there's stuff for the kids, there's stuff for mom and pop, there's stuff for for the grown fans who've been lifelong fans, and that there's stuff for fans of Legends and that miss that grittier Star Wars. People that loved Rogue One, I think, are going to get some cool stuff. So it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of shape the Obi-Wan story takes, because I'm unsure if it's going to be like a darker, grittier Star Wars, or if it's going to be more of a child-friendly Star Wars. My guess is it will be somewhere in between, kind of along the flavor of the prequels, in that it will be mature but not too mature, not like gritty, not like Rogue One mature. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be I think it will be like probably PG-13 at best. I don't think it'll be that dark. So there's the whole theory number 1 of Obi-Wan leaving. But there's also the theory that it's going to totally stay on Tatooine the whole time. And if he stays on Tatooine the whole time, I think they will dive very much into the Hutts and some of the criminal underworld. Problem I have with some of that, not necessarily the Hutts, but if they go into too much of the criminal underworld, I feel like there might be too much crossover with the Mandalorian. Just because the Mandalorian is kind of dealing with it. That's its shtick. So I don't you don't want two shows that are at the same time that are both on desert planets and dealing with bounty hunters and stuff. That's that's just not good. I don't like that. It seems like it's not good for business, because granted, you're people who love deserts and bounty hunters, you will freaking watch both shows, but for everybody else who was looking for a little more variety, they may tune out. So I don't think it'll be that, but that is theory number 2, that is going more into the Hutts, staying on Tatooine, going into more Jabba the Hutt was a big deal, so I think there's definitely the possibility. But here's the thing with if they do that, because of the timeline, let me go back here. This does, especially depending on how many years they decide to spread this out, because even if it's a miniseries, even if it's, let's say, an 8-part miniseries, they can still spread it out over multiple years. First 2 episodes might be him finding something, and then the third episode might be like a year later after he found something, etc. So it can definitely take us to the time of Solo, a Star Wars story, because Solo starts out before they're doing the Obi-Wan story, and of course ends. Solo has a big time jump in it as well. So if Obi-Wan has a time jump as well, I could definitely see them potentially crossing paths. Now, if they do that, which it's going to bring into theory number 3, is that it's going to deal with Maul. I think Maul will be involved, and it may be. I think this is probably the most likely, and it's kind of similar. Basically, theory 2 is that he doesn't leave Tatooine, right? Theory 3 is that he does leave, and instead of dealing with Vader and the Death Star, that he deals with Maul and ends up bringing down, the Syndicate, the Crimson Dawn Syndicate. Well, it might also mean that we see Kira again. That might mean that we see, Han Solo and Chewbacca, and maybe Lando, but probably not Lando. It makes more sense for you not to see Lando again until Bespin, and then it makes the reunion between Han and Lando more important at that point. But I'll be honest, I kind of don't want to see Han Solo in it. I like. It would be kind of cool if it was an Easter egg, like if he's just in the background in a scene or something like that. But I don't want Obi-Wan to have met Han Solo before A New Hope. I want that to be their first meeting. I'm fine if he meets Chewbacca, however, because in theory they should have. I'm fine with him and Chewbacca having a relationship before A New Hope, because that may be the in. That's what drew Obi-Wan to, was like, oh, we can trust these guys with the rebel plans. I know this guy Chewbacca all the way back from, Master Yoda told me about him during the Clone Wars, etc. So like it's possible that he could potentially have a meeting with Chewbacca, but I don't think it's going to be Han and Chewie. I think it will be dealing more with Maul and the Crimson Dawn Syndicate, and possibly even Kira, which also would be kind of cool if they end up doing anything with Rey's parents and stuff, and they tend to dive into that a little bit more. I always loved the whole Rey as a Kenobi theory, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen, unless, of course, they totally retcon stuff in Episode 9. So that is theory number 3. But I've got one more. I've got theory number 4 for you, and that it deals primarily with the Force and Qui-Gon Jinn and Force ghosts, Force visions, and even maybe that doorway between doors. So when I jump into Rebels a little bit, basically there were kind of like portals where, Ezra kind of unlocked this thing where you could kind of pull people out of space and time. And so you could kind of go like basically almost like little wormholes, and this central kind of area where you could jump into different parts of time. That might seem a little bit far-fetched, but it basically, one of the things I had a problem with any kind of Obi-Wan movie is, he spent so much time in the desert. I was thinking, well, is it just going to be him in the desert? The comic book already talked about Obi Wan Kenobi's time in the desert. They've already touched on that, how he was bored and lonely and was just sitting out there fending off goons and Jabba's thugs and keeping them away from the Lars moisture farm. So, I feel like the comic book already said Obi-Wan just sat in the desert and did nothing for 20 years or 19 years. Right? So I'm like, so if that's the, they didn't say that deliberately, but that was always kind of the takeaway. So I feel like now, if they're going to do that, what story can you tell? Well, it's Ewan McGregor, so he can sit around and just drink coffee and talk to the screen, and it's going to be awesome. But, I'd still pay to watch that. But my point is, like, I feel like if they do Force visions, like they have him go back and he meditates, and like this episode is he's thinking back to a time when him and Qui-Gon were young, boom, and then you flash back to there. Liam Neeson has an episode, and then it's a lesson learned, and maybe every flashback has something to prepare him for helping out with Luke. Maybe Qui-Gon teaches him to view things through the Force. Like maybe he's able to kind of leave Tatooine mentally via Force projection, right? Because you could even make the argument that even 20 years after this, he should still be young enough to not be this decrepit old man who just, decides to die, when facing Darth Vader. So it's like, because it seems like at this point the ages aren't lining up perfectly well. So maybe he's using some really cool Force abilities that do drain him a little bit more, and that's why he's more, maybe arguably a little bit weaker in Episode 4. Hence Vader saying, "Your powers are weak, old man." Right? He really shouldn't be quite that old if he was, he's still young right here in Episode 3. So 20 years later, it shouldn't really be like that much of a drain on him. When, there's several of the Jedi Masters were much older than Obi-Wan would have been in Episode 4. So, maybe he's doing some crazy Force stuff to help, to age him and drain him a little bit. But still, Force visions, Force ghosts, I definitely expect to see Liam Neeson. So while Theory 4 might not cover the whole show, I think at least a little bit of Theory 4 will be a part of it. I definitely expect to see Liam Neeson. I am probably expecting to see Maul. I don't really expect... I kind of expect to see Jabba, and I don't really expect to see Obi-Wan go to the Death Star and face Darth Vader. But if that happened, I think that would be probably the best possible outcome, at least for me, because that's my theory. It's a theory I've had for a long time, and I used to joke about it. I took it one step further and said, because the name Death Star was highly classified. They would call it Project Stardust or whatever. And you know how Obi-Wan always has these little quips? Well, my joke is that he would call it, like somebody would say to him, like that there'd be some kind of joke about it being a moon. Somebody like, oh, it's just a moon, or something like that. So like there'd be something like that, but he would counter and say and call it a circle. And he would make some kind of joke to Vader. It's like, there's an awful lot of resources to build this giant metal circle, right? And Vader makes a joke. It's like, it's no circle, it's more than just a circle or something like that. And the joke is that the other thing Vader says to him is the circle is now complete. And so this is a little bit silly because he's talking about the Death Star, right? Or is he, right? So I don't think they'll go that far as to have him call it the circle. But it would still be really cool if they do meet. If he does meet Vader, and that's why Vader saying you should not have come back is a little bit more symbolic. So I do think whatever they do with the Obi-Wan series, it is going to have us watching episode 4 again, be like, aha, they're going to find anything they can to go ahead and pull. You may even want to go back and watch episode 4 and take closer looks at Obi-Wan's hut and look for anything that's in there, stuff that you're like, oh, this is where they got that wall hanging. Oh, this is where they got that giant bandolier or whatever. Like, I'm no bandolier, but you know what I'm saying? Like anything that's in his house, they're probably going to have a story for in this miniseries. So again, I'm not really big on backstories. I've always said before in the past, like I know how a character is going to end up, so I really don't care about the backstories. But this is Ewan frickin' McGregor here. This is like one of our greatest heroes in all of Star Wars. So this one I'm making a total exception for, and I will absolutely watch everything that Ewan ever does because love it, love it, love it. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and make sure you be on the lookout for that episode 9 trailer that's supposed to be coming on later today. All right, we'll talk to you later, guys, and as always, have a great day.